Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I am, of course, your host, Chad. Joining me, the glorious one himself, Marcus. Marcus, how the hell are you?
Good man, back at you.
We're doing pretty well here on the channel. The individual show numbers don't look impressive, but we've had about 1,000 unique listeners this month alone. So, thank you. That's always a good thing to see.
Yes,
We're
sir.
doing this dumb little show just for our own amusement, and if you all like it, y'all want to enjoy it, even better. We do focus mostly on the underground aspect, the lesser talked about things, but this week we're going a little bit more in the mainstream because we think it caters to the underground aspect. Chad and Marcus here to talk to you about Sheamus and why everything I'm hearing about his future is pissing me off. Marcus, Sheamus is gone, left the WWE after about close to 20 years. Initial thoughts on his departure. Not where he's going, not where we want it. Just your initial thoughts on his departure.
Surprising, not shocked, because and we talked about this. New Day with Wolves and Kofi kind of set a precedent. Um, Not only with obviously vets, knowing their value and making decisions, looking at the landscape, but just the whole concept of obviously a lot of these long tenured individuals are being approached uh, to potentially, switch up things with their established deals, and guys aren't going for it, and they're, kind of just calling it on what they kind of see writing on the wall and kind of betting on themselves. So, he's just another one in that line of people that have been there. I don't know the individual amount of years for Woods and Kofi, but combined, it's probably the same amount as Sheamus. So, like I said, it's mildly surprising because I didn't know of the names next. It will be him, but not surprised because he is in that tier, and I think that number's just gonna continue to stack, as I think you alluded to uh, when we talked about
So let's real quickly read this report from Brian Alvarez. Anyone who gets cut these days is all automatically penciled into AEW. I think Sheamus is the last person who should go to AEW as of right now. There might be other guys who get released that could end up in AEW, but let's go over what Brian Alvarez said about how the AEW talent are looking at this, and then I'll get into why I think AEW is the worst place for him to go. Quote: I did talk to a lot of people in AEW who were like, "Are we really going to take this guy?" And let me make this abundantly clear. Everybody I talked to a person was like, "I really like Sheamus. I really like him." But the basic gist of it is, there are so many people under contract, and there are so many people that already can't get on TV, and we're going to hire another 48-year-old. Everyone's got ideas like Sheamus and Cesaro being in the Death Riders, which would be great. Nobody had anything against Sheamus personally. It was just sort of like, here comes another one. Because the New Day's probably coming in. Sheamus would be coming in. And that's three more slots that people would have been there for a long time or who should be on their way up. They're going to be iced out again. People weren't really thrilled about that idea. And then someone on Twitter uh, posted a segment from Shelton Benjamin saying, if I can steal it, it wasn't your spot. And I think there's some fairness to that, but also I do want to point out something that, goes a long way of saying that's not true. If you get a promoter who's desperate for people to tune into your product, they'll put guys in positions that they shouldn't be in. They'll give guys opportunities they don't deserve. Give guys money that they can't win back or earn back, all for the sake or possibility that you're going to get a little bump in the ratings or a couple extra tickets sold. And when you look at what AEW is doing, I cannot say for the life of me that Tony Khan has a clear, concise goal for his roster. It's one thing to get a once in a lifetime talent. Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, Swerve Strickland. It's another thing. Now, I'm not saying they're using someone like Adam Copeland poorly. I'm saying that it's another thing to get someone like Adam Copeland and put him in the main event. Edge and Christian have value as a tag team. In AEW, that is the only value Adam Copeland has. He has no more, I don't think anyone wants to see Copeland versus Omega for the world title, right? I don't think anyone wants to see that, especially when you have Omega and Ospreay just sitting there waiting to happen. They're not excited about 50-year-old cast-offs coming in and taking spots on major program. It's a big reason I don't like the Ciampa signing. I don't want Ciampa in TNA. This isn't me going, oh, I really wish TNA would have gotten Ciampa. I don't want Ciampa. I don't want to watch Ciampa. I don't want to be around him. I think he smells like probably rotten fungus and expired salami meats. And as an Italian, I can make that reference. You can't. But when it comes to what they're doing, it seems like they're just getting anyone who can get any type of excitement on the weekly shows because they're just not getting the kind of heat from their storylines that they need to. And sometimes that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to bring in a guy who can, jolt up the ratings a little bit, who can shake things up a bit. I think about when WCW brought in Sid in '99. They were, Sid wasn't a great signing. He has a legacy about him. He's a Hall of Famer. But in '99, he wasn't the name that was going to turn the product around, but he was a name that could get you at least a little bit more interested in the product. The problem is I don't think Sheamus to AEW gives you the boost you need to warrant the money you'd have to pay him, the time you'd have to give him, and the roster you'd have to give up to get him on TV. They're already losing guys. A lot of what's happening in AEW is happening in TNA. They're losing Big Bill. Jungle Jack Perry hasn't resigned. I think there's a third guy that was on their way out too. I can't remember who that was. Maybe I'm misremembering something. But like you're already having issues keeping your roster active. You don't run house shows. A lot of the talents that are on your show wrestle in other companies just to stay active. And even though you have two TV shows, it seems like there's a set roster for each show and very little overlap and not a lot of room for guys to work their way up. There's not even a third show anymore for guys to wrestle on. So you're going to add another option to that, and I think that goes into why I think this is a bad signing. There's just too much bloat on the AEW roster. Too many people are wrestling on this company who, quite honestly, aren't in a position to get the most out of their wrestling talents. I think about so many of these guys who, if they just left and went to TNA or MLW or wherever, could refortify their legacy. Look at Donovan Dijak. He went from being an also ran in NXT, whose one good moment came against Keith Lee in a losing defense against for the NXT Championship, to now being arguably the top heel in MLW. And I know, I'm sorry, Mario. What was that?
I said Karen Cross.
Karrion Kross, another example. I think when you look at some of these guys, and this is kind of where I get mad when I hear people say things like winning and losing doesn't matter. It fucking matters. I know there's those people who are like, well, it's staged, it's predetermined. It affects your inherent value. If you don't realize that, then you're not paying attention. If you are someone who is just getting dog walked, like say Brian Myers will never be a headliner. Why would he be? He's not someone who has ever been booked to be a headliner. But when you have someone who could possibly get there and they're forced to take L's or they're forced to sit underneath someone like Sheamus or Chris Jericho or Christian or Edge, all you do is nerf their value, number one. And then number two, when they do leave, they have to put in all the work necessary to get back over. It's why I'm so mad at Matt Cardona because I think he's won twice since returning to the WWE in January. He is a jobber. He took the paycheck to take the L's. And listen, that might be fine. He'll get another year or two of WWE money. He'll get his next action figure, but then he's going to get fired. And then he will not have the same credibility he had when he gets fired as when he did when he left the Indies at the end of 2025. So when you look at some of these guys, like a Jungle Jack, you think about like what's that giant Mason Ryan looking guy, Wardlow. You look at these guys and you think to yourself, if only they were given the opportunity, they could break out. But they're not. And then you look at guys like Brian Cage. When he was signed, he was a top guy in TNA who could put on 5-star bangers. And now he's had, I think, a hip replacement, and he's a mid carder, and he's 40 now. Like the AEW roster is just old. Now it's not bad. It's not like the WWE's roster, which is old and bad. AEW's roster is old, and it's getting older. And they're not making moves necessary to get the next generation ready. And this is kind of part of the issue that we're watching with TNA, not for the same exact reasons, but guys who need to step up for TNA aren't ready yet. Now they're going all in on Casey Navarro. After watching this week's show and kind of knowing the spoilers, I know that they have high hopes for Casey Navarro, and that's why he's running a program with Nick Nemeth to help build up to the eventual champion challenger match for Lockdown, be it whoever it is. I don't think it's going to be Casey Navarro, but he's given this opportunity to kill some time, get some work in, and then whoever, I think it's going to be EC3. I've been saying that for weeks. I don't know if he's even still in the company. We'll find out. But I think EC3 and Nick Nemeth is the obvious course for Lockdown. But if it's not, it could be Casey Navarro. And while he should have been not necessary in Casey's example because he only just came back from injury, there are guys who should have been ready for all this turnover, ready to go, and there's not. And you look at AEW, and I feel like that's where their company's going. You're going to have so many guys who could have been ready for the turnover, and they're not. You're losing, Big Bill. You're losing. You might lose Jungle Jack. Richard Holiday opted not to go to AEW. Apparently, he signed with the WWE. You have all these guys, and you're going to bring in another one? I bring this up all the time. A signing could be good for one company and bad for another. Sheamus in MLW or Sheamus in TNA would be a get. But Sheamus isn't a global headliner. He's not a WWE, AEW main eventer. If we're talking about, scales from 1 to 10, 10 being AEW and WWE, and the idea of like where does Sheamus land as the headliner? He's like a 7, maybe a 6 to maybe 6 to a 7. He could headline TNA. You put him in there with some guys like maybe Nick Nemeth, probably have a good 4-star banger there. You put him in there with someone like Jeff Hardy, could still be a real entertaining match. Maybe something with Mustafa Ali, Eddie Edwards, and him would have a killer Hoss match. Those kind of matches make more sense for Sheamus than Sheamus trying to go and keep up with Will Ospreay or Kenny Omega or Swerve or MJF or Page. He has more value in TNA than he would ever have in AEW. And I know how this arc goes. Big name from another company shows up, big reveal, huge debut, music, pyro. 3 weeks later, he's not even on Collision anymore. Happens every time. Happens every time. Ciampa was the big get, and then now he's wrestling mid card matches on Collision, and soon he'll be on Ring of Honor. Like think about Ace Austin, went from being a potential ace, no pun intended, of a company in TNA to being the fourth person on a C tier stable in the what is it, the Bang Bang Gang, something like to that effect with the guns and Juice Robinson, who was once a rising star in New Japan. Now he's just an also ran. Jay White just came back. There's too much bloat in the AW roster.
Real, real quick, do you think there's an expectation that Khan has in the back of his mind that he could repeat what was going on with Mercedes? Some of these talents.
That's a good question. I can't speak to his mentality. What I can say is if he does think that, he's an idiot. Mercedes was 29, 30 when she came over. She was arguably the most popular, or at least one of the three most popular women in wrestling. She was in her athletic prime. She was one of the few women who had the clout and familial ties to carry her gimmick. There's a lot of women who pretend to be like the boss, the CEO, the superstar. Her cousin's legitimately Snoop Dogg. She was legitimately one of the three highest paid wrestlers in the WWE. She was legitimately touted as one of the four pillars of what built the modern day women's division. She had the clout, the charisma, the connections, the talent, the look, everything. You don't get that. You know who else had that, Marcus? Hulk Hogan. Now, I'm not saying Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné is Hulk Hogan in terms of drawing power, but that's the kind of level of name that having all of that coming into your company brings. I can't tell you one other wrestler who has the legitimacy, the value, the name, the look, the connections, and have come in and really earned that. I don't think if you're looking at Sheamus 48, if anyone is thinking, oh yeah, he'd be really good for AEW. He could get over like Mercedes did. If he's thinking that, I think Tony Khan is delusional. I don't think he should be looking at Sheamus. I don't think Sheamus should retire, but AEW style is aggressive. It leads to a lot of injuries, and I think Sheamus going to TNA or MLW or NWA or All Japan or Noah, I think all make more sense for him than going to AEW, signing on board for a nice paycheck, and then enjoying catering for the rest of your run. Like they have fumbled a lot of big names. In fact, I think AEW should stop signing ex-WWE names unless they're one of ones. I think they are doing a very like they got Kyle Fletcher over. That's impressive. That they Megan Bain is a studette. Like Jesus. She's one of the few people in wrestling where I can say I think her tag team's holding her back. Like,
I run her and Thekla against each other.
right? That would be a great tag. That would be a great one-on-one. But like
Yeah.
they're hitting with the free agents off the indies. They're getting names who have value and potential. Thekla's another one. They built her into what she is now. I know Thekla may be like, you know, that's not true. Like I've always been a star. No, AEW turned Thekla into her who into a you. And I feel like when they get the opportunity to put their stamp on these people, they do quite well. Now, like Kip Sabian being, an original and, still with the company and haven't done shit in 7 years, maybe isn't the best example, but I can point to everyone else and I can show you that, for the most part, they do a great job adding value to names. But when you have someone like Sheamus, who I think his name is saturated, I think you can't make you're not signing Sheamus today, who in his prime was maybe a mid to upper mid card guy and an occasional spotter in the main event. You're not going to turn that guy into Macho Man Randy Savage. Like his ceiling is obvious. We know what he is. You're not getting more from that. Even Mercedes Monet was a main eventer, like a genuine, legitimate main event talent. So her being in the main event, being the focal point of the women's division, not surprising. But you're not going to add any more value to Sheamus if you're AEW. And if you can't add more value to a signing, why are you going to sign them? I think Sheamus going to TNA, he would get more value added. He would go immediately to the top of the card. This is a company that's devoid of talent. And I think if you sign him, he goes straight to the main event and has banger after banger with some of the best wrestlers in the world. Yet if he goes to AEW, think about Bobby Lashley in AEW. Yeah, he won the tag team belts, but this was a dude who 3, 4 years ago was beating up Bill Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. And now whenever you see him on TV, he's just in the background of an MVP promo. I think AEW needs to let some of these guys go and just not sign guys who are pushing 50 anymore. Not to say these guys can't wrestle elsewhere, But AEW is hoarding talent and hurting these guys' perceived value outside of the company. Bobby Lashley no longer has the same value he did joining up with AEW because they didn't use him like the guy he should have been. So here we are, looking again at another talent who could be a headliner elsewhere, more than likely going to get stuck, taking the job on Collision. Where do you want to see Sheamus end up, Marcus?
I think a place like MLW and TNA would be great. Um, but this was another question I was going to pose to you. Do you feel like obviously sometimes like Nemeth just want to do the craft, and it's not taken away from other guys. Not saying they don't have to love the game in them, but I feel like they look at places like MLW and TNA potentially as like step backs, whereas AEW is a nice lateral.
Oh,
So
I'm sure that could be part of it. Especially when you think about the
yeah,
paid disparities. You're making more money if you go to AEW than if you go to MLW or TNA.
yeah,
But I also think you can make more money going to MLW or TNA, having big bangers, and then having more people want to bring you in than if you just went
yeah,
to AEW. Like, I can't imagine Jake something is making more money in AEW now. Maybe he is, but before he was wrestling for DPW, he was wrestling for what was it, Warrior Wrestling out of Chicago. He was wrestling with Sammy Callahan's Revolver. He was in TNA. He's not that active anymore. Now he
yeah.
might not need to be. That's completely fair. Like he might be making two times as much in AEW doing a quarter of the work. That's possible. But I think if you're someone like Sheamus or Nick Nemeth, you run the likelihood of being able to make more money elsewhere
Yeah.
on top of TNA, working a few more dates a month than you normally would by just signing with AEW.
Agreed. And as you were talking, and particularly just now kind of ran across my mind. Do you think Khan does that holding a talent thing to use certain names to bait other talent? Like Darby was a big factor in why Punk came to AEW. And I
Yes.
wonder if Khan sees certain names, like if I get him and keep him here, then maybe he'll attract. I hold him long enough and wait it out, they'll attract such and such. I can kind of justify them being there, but not really using the capacity they could be used because I just shovel them in a group like the Don Callis thing or, Moxley's crew, which he's done with a lot of guys.
Yes. I would say yes, but there's more. Yes, he's signing some guys to try to get others, but also he's signing some guys so that they don't sign with TNA. He's signing some guys so if they go to a specific region, they can put them on the card. He's signing some guys that he can send to CMLL or New Japan. He's signing other guys for more than just having them on Dynamite and Collision. One of the reasons is absolutely for acquiring other talent. I don't think he signed Deanna Prazzo to eventually get Steve Macklin, but I do
Yeah,
think
same.
having Deanna Prazzo will allow him an easier pathway to get Steve Macklin should he want him.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's a big reason why Jordan Grace didn't go or didn't even consider AEW. And this is kind of like the inverse of that philosophy. I think she saw how badly her husband was treated there and opted not to join them and
Yeah,
instead went to the WWE. That's my thought, but
yeah,
so let's see where this goes. I don't know where Sheamus will end up, but we got more to talk about. Firstly, we have Jeff Jarrett. He was on the Ariel Helwani show, and he was asked about would he be interested in buying TNA. And Jarrett said, "Look, I'm very happy. I did Ric Flair's last match. That came out of nowhere. Super successful. From there, we signed with AEW. The success I've had in AEW, I do not take that lightly. Wembley, Arthur Ashe Stadium with Adam Page. So many highlights at AEW, and I'm very grateful with everything. But I love opportunities. I think that if the opportunity presented it right, but I have no idea. I'm very happy. I can tell you this much at this stage of my career. I'm the oldest guy actively on the roster. I love what I do, but I'm a businessman and it comes from three generations. Jarrett went on to clarify that he hasn't looked into the company's possible sale. Marcus, I think Jeff Jarrett buying back TNA would be a godsend to wrestling if he can afford to do so and maintain it. I think for one that would be a marvelous thing. I think if Jeff Jarrett and Scott Demore got together, I think they could probably cobble together a money offer that would incur them no extra debt and they would just have to run things and maintain things and possibly grow things. If that were to be the case, I would be the happiest 40-year-old boy in the world. But I don't know if that's possible. Would you like to see Jarrett get back TNA?
I think that would be a really great full circle story, and considering all the conversations we've had about essentially, the people who are, TKO, WWE, and then obviously uh, Silva and the guys with him that's over TNA, like, for as much as attention Attentionality is being projected, it doesn't really come across like that on either side in terms of what we're getting on screen. Certainly the way things are executed. So I think two people that have such a deeply rooted love and his historical narrative with the company, getting their hands back on it, like, lock, stock, and barrel again for good. I think, like I said, would be probably one of the best full circle stories you can tell. I don't like much like you. I don't know if that's gonna happen. Um, there's a potentiality for it because, as you said, the way certain things are looking, it could do that, and potential ideas could be because obviously people will say one thing and be doing something else behind the scenes. But just on paper, I just think that'll be a great full circle thing. It'll be another transition for TNA, but I think you wanted to go to two people who are heavily invested in keeping the soul of the brand, making sure that it survives in a time where it's like it's potentially the most profitable it's been in years, but probably the most creatively stagnant it's felt in a very long time. So I just think that'll be great. And it's really cool just to kind of hit certain clips from that interview. And you've talked about this before a lot of times with Jared. I don't get enough credit for his career as a performer, but his mind for the business is A1. You know,
Incredibly intelligent. He talked about, and I forget if it was with Helwani or somebody else. He talked about why he booked himself as champion. He didn't bring up the Spike TV aspect, but he did bring up the one aspect that I talked about before, and that's he was the he was always sure that he was the only one who wouldn't jump to the WWE. That was always his concern, and he knew he wasn't going anywhere. Sometimes though, you know, Spike TV forced their hand. And that was always kind of a big to do. Kevin Nash was going to win the title at Bound for Glory '05 because Spike TV wanted him to. They wanted to have a big name from WCW who or WWF who could come into their debut show in October, I think it was, or September, and headline. And that's why they took the belt off of Raven because they didn't think Raven was a big enough name. They put it back on Jarrett, and then they got it onto Rhino, and then back to Jarrett, and then eventually to Christian Cage, and then it went from there. But I think him being as I think him being where he is in his career, I think people now don't need to have the same kind of animosity for him as a booker because he's not wrestling like he did and he's not booking himself anymore. So I think now people are going to start to understand the true brilliance of Jeff Jarrett and the true talent that he has. He's an incredible figure. He's pushing 60.
yeah,
And he's someone who I think would be great in TNA, not just as an owner, but if he wanted to come back and wrestle on top of re-owning the company, I think that would be great. So
yeah,
I'm curious to see
yeah.
how that would end up looking.
No, absolutely. Sounds great. It looks good. I can say I've had the pleasure of interviewing him once we share that was
Yes, we
really
did.
cool. Um, but also, like, this is what we talk about a lot. Um, we've talked about it a lot because obviously I TNA love, but um in terms of they do like a list of like greatest wrestling feuds that started on a personal level and ended up like being professional gold, you gotta bring up the whole thing with him and Angle. It's one of the
Hmm.
great from and obviously I would imagine he doesn't like to talk about it much because it was so personal behind the scenes, and then obviously it translated to screen. But that really is one of the great wrestling feuds, and not just in TNA. I'm talking like period to me because of just how it translated from personal to professional, and then what those two were able to cultivate over a number of years that we were seeing like happen in real time. So it's a lot that his story was there, and just on a personal basis, the man's been through a lot. You know, trying to being a wrestling figure, he's been through a lot of this stuff with his dad, and you know all the other personal stuff. And he's really a great just wrestling story in general. So yeah, man, this is us wishful thinking, but I just think that'll be really cool. He's had a long and very kind of roller coaster ride in terms of relationship with TNA. But if he could really get back to it and get back to it in a way that is healthy for both sides, I think that would just be fantastic. I don't know if a lot of people would do it because for as much as Carlos Silva comes off like a quality guy, just it's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we got another quote from Jeff Jarrett talking about TKO's possible exit plan on WWE. In the same conversation, he brought up TKO, and he said, "I've already told Nick Khan this via text. You can't argue with stock reports. They have printed money since the merger. To me, I'm the idiot if I start throwing stones like creative is this and this is that, and they went back to Vegas in back-to-back years. Okay, who said they were not going to make mistakes? Creative is subjective, stock is not. The one thing that I'm very curious about going back to Tony answers to Tony. Vince used to answer to Vince. Now, even when he went public, he still controlled the stock. Ari Emanuel, doesn't really answer to Ari. Ari answers to Wall Street. How long? How sustainable is that going to be? They're a lot smarter than I am. They probably already have their exit strategy. I don't know that. But at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to explain to Wall Street, hey, we need to invest in A, B, C, and D because of this, and this. Now, we've talked about this before, Marcus. I believe that TKO is 3 years out from selling WWE, and it seems like Jeff Jarrett seems to agree. And I think that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, assuming whoever bought WWE would buy all of it and not open up their stocks to anyone else. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, with everything going on, it just deeply seems like there's a bottom line that needs to be met, narrative that needs to be met, and that's far more important than the actual thing that brings the crowds in the first place, which is the actual wrestling, the stories, and the talent. And we see that with the way they do those horrible advertisements, um, the rate at which they put out these PLEs, the way they pose themselves out to the Saudis. Like it's just a lot of other narratives that seem to take precedent over what the foundation, heart, and soul of the product should be, which is the actual wrestling. Um, and they could talk about the difference in objectivity and the creative that they blew in the face. Like some of this stuff is just so blatantly head scratching you can't really get away from it. But yeah, I mean, all I could think about when he was talking, like, well, one, like, just how again how much of a great mind he has to like analyze it like that, because a lot of these wrestling fans just can't take a step back and look at it for what it is because they feel like they need to have an emotional attachment to the company and people they like. Uh, First thing I thought of was stuff that you said because you called it a while back. And as you were talking, it kind of reminded me like it felt like the Charlotte's Web thing where they, the uh the shining up and fattening up of Wilbur and it came all cool until you realized like they was like putting him on display and this that and ultimately it was to get him slaughtered. They would prop him up, and all this stuff to get him slaughtered, and then obviously, you know, the story of how she saved him and all that stuff. But that is kind of how it feels because and the stuff that they doing with these elder statesmen in the company, kind of just allowing them to kind of get away. I think it's just another great example of that, and it might be to the point now where, as a cost cutting measure, even though they're making hand over fist, they're picking names almost that they know to go to with these restructured deals that they know are kind of gonna chunk the deuces at them, and then that's a hell of a loosening of the budget with these contracts. So there may be some duplicitousness in that as well.
There might be, there might be.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna pivot a little bit. Gotta talk about JBL. So we're a few weeks away
Double.
from this being more relevant than not. But apparently OVW had their 13th or 14th hundredth episode, and it was a 3 hour extravaganza. The biggest names of OVW's history were there: John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin were not available. But Danny Basham was. Jamin Olivencia, remember him? Kevin Thorne showed up. So did Jesse Goddard. The main event was Cash Mason and someone else against Cash Flow, who's a longtime OVW wrestler and currently on that one Tulsa King show, and JBL. And JBL is 59 years old. Does not have the same muscle structure in his arms that he used to. He's got a bit of a paunch, and he doesn't move as well as he once did. But I got to be honest with you, Marcus. After watching the match, which objectively, it's not going to headline All In, right? Like we know what this match is. It's a novelty match. But after watching that match, I'm a little bit perturbed that TNA just straight up abandoned the JBL storyline for no reason and didn't have him wrestle there because you could have gotten a nice little boost in terms of viewership by advertising the return of JBL after 14 or 15 years. And they didn't. Now, again, I don't think JBL had a great match at OVW. I don't think his match was anything to write home about. If he never wrestles again, the match will be memorable in the sense that it was his final match, though I don't think he's said anything about it being his final match. But I'm perturbed that we didn't get to see how this whole boiled out with Kazarian and Hendry and Nemeth. I know you haven't watched the OVW show, and I don't know if you have any interest in seeing the main event that JBL was in, but is there a part of you that would either like to have seen JBL have one final match in TNA, or not in TNA, but in general via TNA? Or are you still open to the idea of JBL coming into TNA and having that match, even though they seem to abandon the storyline by now?
Well, I'd be open to it. Look, JBL is nothing if not personality, right? Like, I was thinking about it as you were talking. He's another one of those interesting names that kind of went from zero. Not that he wasn't great in his heyday, particularly with APA, one of the most rewatchable segments ever you will see. But him going from that to John Bradshaw Layfield and all that, and him being the prime heel for the company at the time when they actually needed it. No matter how annoying he was as that character, he had a lot of great moments. We've talked about him in the past, and if he's gotten himself been able to stay in well enough of shape, and I don't know what he's doing, stem cells or whatever have you. I would imagine I had to ask you, does he still got his bread and butter? Probably still being one of the guys that hits one of the nastiest clotheslines you'll see. Um, so I think he's very much useful in that regard. And it's not like TNA hasn't pulled in some vets. They've been doing that with all year. Um, and I think it would be a great thing to kind of tip off with Nemeth or Kazarian or have him kind of buzz around some of the guys like Elijah or some other names like that. I think him and him and Francis could have a good talking back and forth on the mic. So I think there's definitely value there. Um, do you think they can afford it?
Yeah, I mean, they brought him in
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
I think now though it's fair to ask again because they've cut so many guys. They've let so many people leave who have asked for their departure. And I don't know if that's because they don't have the money to afford these guys anymore or if they just don't want the headache of having somebody who doesn't want to be there. If it's the latter, then yeah, they can bring back JBL. They were paying him in 2024, 2025 when he wasn't, when they didn't have that AMC money. And they have probably close to 15 or 20 advertising partners now who are helping pay for the show and paying for the company. I I do think the idea of them quote not making money and the quote unquote having to pay down Anthem's debts, I think are one and the same. I think TNA is turning a profit, but their profits being put back into Anthem, not in TNA. And I think if you can go, yeah, there's a reason to bring him in. We should bring him in. I think you would be able to easily afford him because, like, hell, OVW afforded him. And I can't imagine OVW is paying anywhere close to what TNA is paying. So, like, yeah, I think you could get JBL in. I think JBL could have a retirement match or like a tag team match or even a couple tag team matches in TNA. I don't think you put him in a singles match on a Bound for Glory pay per view. I don't think you do that. But I do think you could, in essence, get him as part of a 6-man tag, an 8-man tag, a 4-man tag, what have you, and have some fun with him. Especially if you pair him with some like a hometown man who's super fucking over and seems to be somebody that everybody loves. So like, very very possible. Would Is there anyone else that's out there who's kicking around that you would also like to see beyond JBL? Um, like Jinder Mahal's still a free agent. Um, Ridge Holland's still a free agent.
these two are either in. I wonder, are they in AEW? But if they available, I'd like to see Catanzaro and Caden Caden Cole. What am I?
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
Casey
Caden.
Catanzaro and
Yeah,
yeah.
they sound like a
I think
'90s
they'd be
R&B duo.
yeah, they'd be a good I like them as a team. I think they'd be great in the tag division. Um, we talk about um thinking that Woods and Kofi would be a great addition. Trying to see who else is out there because I don't think either of us thought like, oh man, if they can get Fabian, I can. I don't think either one of us was like, no. Oh, I'm trying to think who else is free agent.
Well, I know that Cash Wheeler and Dax Hardwood are, kind of on hiatus from AEW at the moment. I don't know if that means they're free agents. I think that was the other group I was thinking about. If TNA were to so here's the thing. I think they would be great for the health of TNA's just optics. I want to see guys like Sinner and Saint and the Great Hands hold those belts and be the face of the division before I see, two near 40-year-olds in Cash and Dax come in and dominate the tag
Yeah.
team division, right? That's my personal take. So,
No, agreed. And speaking of two, like, and I don't know how much you checked him out, but speaking of, that's that conversation about hoarding talent. If they could get out, because I just don't, they're not doing nothing with these two guys. Private Party would also be a great addition to TNA.
hmm
But they have absolutely cooled off on the two of them. Um, I think they would be, I think they would be good as well. They really, man, they really do. They have a lot of talent that they're not using, particularly in any fashion that they were doing. Um, I seen a conversation on Twitter about what we got on with with Nyla. Do you think she'd be good in the division?
Nyla Rose,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
She's 44 years old. She's been wrestling for I don't even know how long at this point. She's not very good. I think that's something that people kind of forget about. She's been wrestling since 2012, and this is still as good as she is. And now she's older. She's beaten up, broken down, in her mid 40s, and you already have an issue getting talent like Harley Hudson over, and getting talent like Jody Thread over, and Danny Luna. I don't think going and pivoting to a wrestler like Nyla Rose is going to help things in TNA. Maybe an Abaddon. I know she was a free agent. I don't know if she still is. Max the Impaler, former NWA wrestler. Like, those two could give you something, but I don't think Nyla's the answer. I think Nyla's going to cause more questions than solutions. So I think
Gotcha.
that's kind of where I sit there. Um, but yeah, that seems to be like I'm double checking. There doesn't seem to be any really big news. Uh, House of House of Glory is leaving Triller, so that's happening. WWE's putting out a new 30th anniversary belt for the NWO for $700.
A little summer of punk, huh?
CM Punk beat Sami Zayn. That's wild. Not sure why anyone cares. Raw is only bringing in 2.3 million viewers on Netflix. That's hilariously bad. They're not going to be. I think NXT may offer them a new deal, right? Like when it's all said and done, I think they may offer them a new deal. It's not going to be for what it could have been. If you look at what they're making now on Netflix, there might be a little more money on that deal, but I think when you adjust everything for inflation, I think it'll actually be for less money technically than what they were earning currently.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess. Oh, Rusev's doing something on Raw again. That's cool. He's in a feud with Joe Hendry. All right, whatever. Coming up on the website, real. Oh, 1 second. Coming up on the website, realnerdcorp.com, we will be doing a mid-year report cards for the five major American promotions: TNA, WWE, AEW, MLW, NWA. I'm thinking there might be a Japan and Mexico based one that doesn't focus on the totality of the country's talent, but maybe a few select names. That might be in the work, but I got to get through the five American-based companies before I even think about doing any international stuff. So those are coming up. The TNA, MLW, and NWA one are going to be up sooner. Probably the first one may drop at the end of the week, and then they'll probably pop up every 3 to 4 days from there on out until we get through them all. Um, that's the update on those. We'll be back next week for another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. Marcus, you have another podcast. What's going on there at the True Penny Show this week?
Yeah, we're talking Sendai Girls and Marigold this week. Look at three shows across those two promotions. So check us out there, and yeah, we should have some fun stuff coming up. A lot of stuff on the horizon, particularly as we gearing up for the arduous marathon that is the G1, as you know. Uh,
The G1
so
logo this year looks incredible.
yeah, so looking forward to seeing what that brings out. That's always a guarantee in some form of fashion. So yeah, be on the lookout for that.
So that'll bring us to the end of the show then. RealNerdCorp.com, RealNerdCorp.com. I'm working my way through the MLW shows, so we'll see if the last couple shows are living up to the quality. You can find us on YouTube and Twitch at Wrestling Underground. You can also find us on the website, once again, at realnerdcorp.com. We're on Twitter at NERDCORP. Marcus, you're on Twitter at Paradox Kid, PARADOXKID.
That's me.
And you can also find him on this other podcast, The True Penny Show, at on Twitter at TRUEPENNYSHOW. That's True Penny Show on Twitter. They post links to all their shows on their Twitter accounts, so be sure to check them out there. You can find me on my personals at Chad Nerdcorp on Twitter at CHADNERDCORP and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at CHADSPHOTOHUT. Be sure to tune in next week as we talk more TNA, MLW, NWA, and more of the edges of wrestling fringedom, if you will. For Marcus, I'm Chad. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, take us home.
Nice.